El 18 de julio en el patio de un convento, el pueblo madrileño con el quinto regimiento. Venga, jaleo, jaleo, sueño de una ametralladora y Franco se va a paseo, y Franco se va a paseo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hola, buenas tardes a todas y todos. I'm Sebastian Faber, and as chair of ALBA's Board of Governors, I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to this online celebration of our national monument, newly restored in San Francisco. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to see so many of you connected in real time to this event, and how excited I feel about the program ahead with Isabel Allende, Bill Fletcher, Walter Hood, and many others. As I'm sure you can imagine, working for ALBA is a real privilege. As our motto says, we teach history to inspire activism and to uphold human rights. But to carry forth the legacy of those who first stood up to fascism is also a heavy responsibility, especially now when that legacy seems perhaps more relevant than at any other moment since World War II. We at ALBA keep up that legacy through our quarterly magazine, The Volunteer, through our website at alba-valve.org, through our film screenings, our speaker series, and of course programs like these. We also work with hundreds of teachers across the country at the middle and high school level to make sure that the story of the Lincoln Brigade reaches those young people who are, after all, the future of this country. Now, we know that there are many worthy causes these days that ask for your support, but if you believe in anti-fascism and if you believe in education, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to help us keep up, or better, even expand our fight against fascism in all its guises. Mil gracias anticipadas. Thank you so very much. Salud.
Thank you, Sebastian, and thank you, ALBA, for putting on this event. I'm Richard Bermack. I'm your host for today. I've been involved with the Veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade and the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives for many years. I worked with the original Monument Committee and worked on getting the monument rebuilt. Universal health care, education, workers' rights, women's rights, equality, religious freedom, the right to vote. Today, these are all under attack. We face an epic battle this November and the threat of fascism. But this is not the first time fascism has threatened to destroy a democracy. In 1934, the Spanish Republic was attacked, and workers from all over the world answered the call to fight fascism, and many gave their lives. The Lincoln Brigade Monument honors not only those who fought in Spain, but also the values they fought for. It honors the long tradition of activism throughout history. Today, we are once again called to action in dark times. In the battle, we can use some cultural inspiration from writing and music. So our first speaker is the world-renowned Chilean-American author, philanthropist, longtime supporter of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, Isabel Allende.
Welcome to this virtual gathering organized by ALBA, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives, in which we honor the Americans who went to Spain in 1936 to fight against fascism. We also celebrate the monument of the Lincoln Brigade in the Embarcadero in San Francisco. And we also recognize today No More Death, No Más Muertes, that works to protect the lives of Central and South American refugees trying to find safety in the United States. First, some history. In 1936, a democratic leftist government was elected in Spain, the Second Republic. Immediately, the forces of the right, the Catholic Church, and the military, led by Franco, rebelled against the government. They were helped by Mussolini and Hitler. A brutal civil war ensued. The country was torn to pieces. hundreds of thousands were killed in battle or executed after being conquered. Franco's fascist dictatorship would last 40 years. Many young men and women around the world saw the Spanish Civil War as an epic struggle between democracy and fascism, which had already triumphed in Germany and Italy. Between 35 and 40,000 volunteers went to fight for the República in the international brigades. Among them were 2,800 Americans who came to be known as the Lincoln Battalion or the Lincoln Brigade. In October of 1938, when the Civil War was practically lost for the Republicanos, the international brigades were sent home. They had played a crucial role in major battles where they were used as shock troops and suffered devastating losses. In Barcelona, they received a hero's goodbye from tens of thousands of grateful Spaniards. The famous Pasionaria, whose voice had accompanied the Republicanos during those 3 terrible years, bid them farewell. She talked about how volunteers gave up everything and they asked for nothing, only for a post in battle and the honor of dying for Spain. How thousands remained shrouded in Spanish earth and would never be forgotten. She asked them to return in the future, for in Spain they would find a homeland. Among those who remained shrouded in Spanish earth were 1/3 of the American volunteers. They will never be forgotten. As the fascists conquered the last bastion of democracy, 500,000 people escaped in freezing January weather to the French border. They were herded into improvised concentration camps in beaches surrounded by barbed wire and guarded by cruel Senegalese troops, without shelter, water, food, or medical help. Thousands died, among them most of the children. At that time, the Chilean poet Pablo Neruda convinced the Chilean president to receive some Spanish refugees. He went to Europe, raised money, bought a cargo ship, conditioned it, and selected 2,200 passengers. The ship arrived in Chile the same day the Second World War started in Europe. At the port, masses of people had gathered to welcome the Spaniards. Chile received them with open arms. Those refugees and their descendants contributed immensely to the country that gave them a home, as most immigrants usually do. I told that story in my latest novel, A Long Petal of the Sea, because the plight of displaced people is close to my heart. I have been a foreigner all my life. I was a political refugee for 13 years, and now I am an immigrant. My foundation works helping refugees worldwide, especially at the Mexican border, where thousands and thousands of people seek asylum in the United States. The Trump administration has made sure that they get no help. I am, therefore, particularly moved by the extraordinary work of No More Deaths, No Más Muertes. Today, there are more refugees in the world than ever before, and the number keeps growing. They are escaping from war, crime, and extreme poverty. They are desperate. They risk their lives in dangerous journeys because anything is better than staying in their own land. This is a dark time, my friends. It's a time of war in many places and potential war everywhere. A time of nationalism and populism, of racism, cruelty, fear, violence, poverty, and inequality. A time when the threat of fascism is present again. But this is also a time of hope for a new kind of life, for a better world, for a brighter future. Today, like 84 years ago in Spain, we need brave and idealistic young men and women like the volunteers of the Lincoln Brigade, willing to come forward in defense of the values and principles that sustain our civilization.
They were old when I was young. Now they've all but passed away. Now it's just a second-hand memory of the day when from all around the world they sailed off to Spain, where they fought against the fascists, where so many men were slain. Who will recall the days when they all stood side by side, now that the last Lincoln veteran died? Beside Martin Luther King, or in a veterans parade, you could see the men who made the journey to join the 15th Brigade. When men of many nations, of most every creed and hue, Catholics and Protestants, atheists and Jews, joined together in the trenches to turn back the fascist tide, now that the last Lincoln veteran died. The working class of many nations join in a desperate bid with what weapons they could find. They fought to save Madrid from Brussels and Berlin, Galway and London town. Who will recall the brigadistas who went to take the fascists down? There beside the Spanish people, even the figs and olives cried, now that the last Lincoln veteran died. There's a valley in Spain called Jarama. It's a place that we all know so well. It was there that we gave of our manhood, where so many of our brave comrades fell.
Thanks, Dave. I'm moved every time I hear that ballad. And I also want to thank Isabel and her son Frias for his help with the video. The International Brigade was defeated in Spain during the war. But when the veterans returned to the U.S., they formed the Veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade organization to continue the struggle for social justice and fight against fascism. For them, that became a lifetime cause. The monument was originally built in 2008 out of onyx, a very beautiful, romantic, idealistic material that almost radiates history. But the harsh, wet, waterfront environment wore the onyx down. After many alternatives were investigated, industrial glass, the same material used in the new San Francisco skyscrapers, was chosen for reconstructing the monument. Today, we are rededicating this new industrial strength monument to pass the legacy of the Lincolns to a new generation of activists fighting for social justice and attempting to stop the rise of fascism. The Lincoln vets have often been referred to as forever activists, the title of the film by Judy Montell, one of our Bay Area Brigade comrades who recently passed away. Our next speaker, Bill Fletcher, is another forever activist. He began working in the labor movement when he was 15 and has been involved as an author, journalist, educator in just about every social justice movement. He is currently executive editor of Global African Worker. Bill, tell us what inspired you.
Hi, I'm Bill Fletcher, and I'm really honored to be able to speak about the Abraham Lincoln Brigade today. It was over 80 years ago that men and women from around the world responded to the call to stand up in the defense of the Spanish Republic, which was under assault from internal fascists, the Falange, under General Francisco Franco, supported by the Nazis and the Italian fascists. Later described as premature anti-fascists, these men and women were people that stood up and understood the danger, the existential danger represented by fascism, and were prepared to put their lives on the line in defense of democracy. We have to honor these men and women and recognize it was very unique, but not unprecedented. I mean, in some respects, the men and women that joined the Abraham Lincoln Brigade from the United States were the same type of people that joined with John Brown and went into Kansas during the so-called period of bloody Kansas prior to the Civil War. They were the same types that joined on the side of Union forces fighting the Confederacy during the Civil War. They were the type of people that deserted from the U.S. military during the U.S. War of Aggression against the Filipinos, and sided with the Filipino people against the U.S. annexationists. I mean, the history has existed of people from the United States that have taken such a stand, put their lives on the line, been willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. And we have a great deal to remember and honor about them. The Abraham Lincoln Brigade had racial diversity, what we would call now racial diversity, including having officers of color, whereas the U.S. military remained segregated until after World War II. You had great artists that went to support the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, like Paul Robeson, Langston Hughes, and others, that made the courage of the soldiers of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade a cause célèbre in the United States and elsewhere. But after World War II, this contribution by the men and women that volunteered, the international volunteers, was demonized in some cases as part of the growing Cold War. They were described as all Reds. Their commitment to democracy was denigrated. And to a great extent, they were written out of history. Until a few moments when people started to identify that no, men and women had volunteered to fight fascism, and they had put their lives on the line, and they had made an amazing contribution, even though the Spanish Republic was defeated. Honoring those men and women today remains critically important, the monument that was created to them, and it needs to be incorporated into all of our history. Not just the history taught to young people, but many adults have no sense of this history. Programs like this are going to be very important in reminding everyone of the value, the courage, the dignity of the men and women of the Abraham Lincoln Brigades. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill, for that moving tribute to the vets and of the activist legacy and its importance, and to remember it. It took many years of persistence to get the monument rebuilt. I'd like to thank Paul Cox of Veterans for Peace for all his help, Marina Grande for all her negotiations with the San Francisco Arts Commission and ARG, and I want to thank ARG and the Commission for rebuilding the monument. I'd also like to thank all the children of the vets and others who helped. Now I'm going to read an excerpt of a letter of support from Manus O'Riordan, an old friend of ours, the officer of one of many international organizations similar to ALBA. Dear comrades, we in Ireland are particularly proud of the courageous brigadistas who fought in the ranks of the James Connolly section of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion. Before the pandemic outbreak, it had been my firm intention to honor them by being personally present at this ALBA rededication of the restored monument. I am, however, certainly present with you in spirit, and I send you the warmest comradely greetings on the occasion of this wonderful celebration. Salud, Manus O'Riordan, International Brigades Memorial Trust, Ireland, Secretary, and the Friend of the International Brigade in Ireland, Executive Member. The Bay Area Lincoln Brigade Monument began as an idea of the children of the veterans in the late 1990s. Plaques honoring the Lincolns were being erected in Seattle, Madison, and New Hampshire. Brian McWilliams, a leader of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, the ILWU, who was a member of the San Francisco Port Commission, was working on creating a Harry Bridges Plaza in front of the ferry building on the Embarcadero, and expressed interest in a Lincoln Brigade monument becoming part of it. What really gave the boost to the monument was a large bequest to the Bay Area chapter of VALB from an anonymous donor. Veteran Dave Smith, the leader of the post at the time, seized the opportunity and reserved a portion of the money to create a monument. He wanted to do something that would be more than a plaque or statue, something that would tell a story, would have world-class status of a national monument. The Bay Area Monument Committee was formed by Linda Lustig, Dave's daughter, along with Martha Jarocki, the daughter of vet Leonard Olson, and other vets' children and supporters. Linda, what happened next?
Hello, I'm Linda Lustig, Chair of the original Monument Committee and Dave's daughter. Following its history, the Vets Group was reluctant to spend significant funds on itself. Eventually, it was decided that half of the bequest would be donated to various anti-fascist organizations that the vets had supported over the years. However, the remainder would be saved in the hopes of building a monument in San Francisco. The discussion brought up the desire of the vets' adult children to celebrate the lives of the vets in the context of their activities after Spain, in addition to their efforts to support the elected government of Spain against a fascist dictator. The monument needed to encourage future generations to act on their beliefs rather than be limited to honoring past deeds. The Monument Committee consisted of Dave, several relatives of vets, and longtime supporters, including filmmaker Judith Montel, who recently passed. We were assisted by consultants, knowledgeable about public art installations. A design competition was held, and Ann Chamberlain and Walter Hood of the Bay Area submitted a design. Ann and Walter had created a monument that represented the spirit of the vets, with features such as red earth and olive trees reminiscent of Spain, and a steel frame holding panels that would be filled with photos and quotes representing the war, some of the vets themselves, the 1934 waterfront strike in San Francisco, peace and civil rights marches, the labor movement, and overall could represent the vets' participation in social justice struggles. The panels were to be made of onyx, and the photos embedded in them in such a way as to be sharp when seen from afar, but become diffuse as you walked closer. The Monument Committee would be involved in selection of material for the panels. The artist challenge, in their own words, was to create a space that linked the viewer to the larger context of the city while offering opportunity for personal reflection and contemplation. We were very pleased to select Ann and Walter as our monument designers. It took 8 years and many meetings and hearings to accomplish our goal. We organized an ever-growing number of supporters to attend meetings and speak at many meetings of the San Francisco Port Commission, Arts Commission, and other agencies. We worked with many neighbors of the final site and the current and former San Francisco supervisors of the area. Walter worked on the project throughout, and Ann did so as long as she could, as she experienced a recurrence of cancer. With their dedicated assistance and creative redesigns to fit the changing locations, the monument was finally approved when then Mayor Gavin Newsom expressed the desire for the project to move forward. The monument opening was formally celebrated on March 30th, 2008. You will now hear from Martha Jarocki of the Monument Committee speaking about Walter Hood.
I am Martha Jarocki, daughter of Abraham Lincoln Brigade vet Leonard Olson. I was also a member of the Monument Committee. Walter Hood, landscape designer and public artist, professor at UC Berkeley, has received several architectural and arts awards, including a MacArthur Fellowship. Walter was a rising star when we selected the design that he and Ann Chamberlain submitted to the committee. Since then, he's become known for his designs of public spaces that recognize the lives of a variety of communities. He has co-edited a book out in November, Black Spaces Matter, calling out the importance of race, history, and meaning in the design of public spaces. Walter has said about his design work in communities of color, "Each project is fraught with chance. I'm not trying to solve a problem per se. I'm trying to put something out in the world that has been covered up, erased, which might allow people to see the world and themselves in a different way." I would say that he and Anne Chamberlain have also done that for the Lincolns.
I'm really happy to be with you here today. My name is Walter Hood. I'm one of the artists who worked on the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Monument. Anne Chamberlain and I, when we conceived of the piece many years ago, we really fell in love with the Abraham Lincoln Brigaders, their stories and their songs. We even had the opportunity to go to a couple of the parties that they held at the Kaiser Center. And we were taken, one, by the emotive quality of everyone who went over and fought against fascism. I particularly remember reading one of the texts from Mississippi to Madrid and being inspired by this young Black man who went from Mississippi all the way to Chicago and then ended up over in Spain and then giving Langston Hughes a ride. Activism has always been a part of our work, trying to get people to see things or even learn about things in which that might be new to them. And for me, learning about the Abraham Lincoln Brigaders, these young people who went over, who felt that they had a cause, they felt so powerful to go over and help out in the world, even when their nation wasn't leading. And that very early, we wanted to bring in some semblance of Spain through the red dirt of Spain. I remember having conversations about, should the ground be red? We wanted to bring in olive trees to really talk about the flora. But we also were taken by, inert material, and we really wanted the piece to kind of sing to that. And we thought that we wanted something that was reflective and something that would allow text and image to simultaneously have a relationship. And that led us to the piece in having some of the images and some of the texts and some of the songs and some of the writings from different people to be on one panel, kind of enmeshed in space. And, in a way, that was one of my first pieces that led me to really thinking about how landscape architecture could be this place where you could exhume sort of memory and history. And I just remember very early working on the project, a lot of the veterans talked a lot about the union work, the activities that went on along the Embarcadero, and that's why the Embarcadero was a powerful place for this to happen. I had never made that connection between how art could actually talk about something larger and something more contextual. And this notion of making history, relevant even today. And again, one might think of, left or right politics, but this notion that just caring, can allow great things to happen in the world. And imagine these great writers, average, normal people, nurses went over to fight for a cause. I think in the landscape today, we're faced in this country dealing with those symbols, those things that actually happen here from our colonial history. And maybe the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Monument can offer ways in which we can talk about difference. Difference not because there's a diversity, many different things, but difference in that there are more ways in which we can see the world. And maybe through our words, maybe through our songs, maybe through the images that we project out into the world, maybe that's a way in which we can see ourselves, but also see the rest of the world. And again, this notion of remembering the ALB and even seeing a lot of the vets at the end of their long, prosperous lives, it was really a pleasure to make manifest their story, their history out in space.
Hello, my name is Susan Schwarzenberg, and I'm an old friend and colleague of Anne Chamberlain's, and also a fellow artist. Anne was a deeply committed, inspirational artist and scholar and teacher whose work really centered on the human story. She wanted to tell the story of people whose lives often go unrecognized, and for this particular memorial, she wanted to bring it out into the landscape, not just to make a statue, but to make a place that could commemorate the important work of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. She gave voice not to just one person or two people, but she was able to give a collective sense of what those stories meant to a community of people. And I think that's what's so incredible about the monument. You don't hear the voices of just one or two. You really get the sense of what it meant that a cadre of people went to Spain. They weren't trained military people. They were workers. They were everyday people who were against fascism. It is so important that these brave people went out on a limb to do that. And today, I feel, with Black Lives Matter and what we're seeing in the streets, it's really similar. To bring those voices into public spaces is really important for us as Americans. We need to do that to make sure our voices don't get lost. It's remarkable that Anne and Walter were able to get the monument placed in such an important space as the Embarcadero, right in the waterfront. We need to do more in that area to help people understand why it's an important place to the people of San Francisco. When the vets went to Spain, San Francisco had just gone through a general strike in support of the longshoremen. And the longshoremen were the heroes of San Francisco, which at that time was a labor town. Working people went to fight in Spain to join other working people. Part of the reason this historical district was formed as a heritage site is in memory of the longshoremen and the struggles that went on here. The original choice of the onyx was because of its special properties and that it could be used interpretively. The stone glowed, light went through it, she could print on both sides, so there was text on one side, image on the other. It had these red veins in it, and the red lettering. You know, the whole project felt like it was bleeding. It felt flesh-like in a way, as if these stories were bleeding to be told. Another wonderful thing about a memorial like this in a public space is that as you're walking around it, you're seeing different aspects of it at different times. And while they're doing that, they're also getting glimpses of the city, glimpses of the bay, glimpses of the Embarcadero. So you kind of put the whole thing together in space, in place, and time, which makes it really powerful. The Abraham Lincoln Brigade Memorial was one of Anne's last projects before she died. And I know it was deeply meaningful to her. I heard from one of her friends that in her last days, just before she died, this friend of hers would take her around the city to see some of her many projects. And she had some memory problems at that time, but every time she was at the memorial, she remembered it and really loved being there with the memorial and remembering the stories.
Hi, I'm Catherine Powell. I'm the director of the Labor Archives and Research Center at San Francisco State University. So I'm here today to talk about the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Memorial that is on the waterfront down in San Francisco. This is a really important monument to document the history not only of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, but of working people. The location of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Monument is on the Embarcadero near the ferry building. Many consider this area of the city hallowed ground because it's central to the fight for justice, and many lost their lives in the fight for better working conditions for all. One of the first key fights that happened in San Francisco that really gave us the reputation of being a union town was the historic 1901 city-front strike. The mayor, James Phelan, he actually threw the police force's power behind the employers. Union members got together and they formed the Union Labor Party, which dominated city politics for the next decade by voting in new mayors, and even the Board of Supervisors all were part of the Union Labor Party. The waterfront was again a pivotal part of the next significant labor struggle in 1907. Multiple privately owned trolley lines converged in front of the ferry building, creating a hub for the city's transit system. Streetcar drivers went out on strike for an 8-hour day, and over the next several months, bloody battles took place throughout the city. Before it was over, 25 people were killed, making it San Francisco's deadliest strike. A few years later, class conflict broke out as the U.S. was drawn into World War I. In 1916, labor boycotted a Preparedness Day parade thrown by business leaders to drum up support for the war. During the parade, a bomb planted by the unknown terrorists exploded on the waterfront at Stewart and Market Streets, killing 10 and injuring dozens more. Labor leader Tom Mooney and others were falsely accused and prosecuted in a series of corrupt trials. Fellow Unionists fought for 3 decades to free Mooney and celebrated with a march down Market Street when he was finally released in 1939. The city's most historic labor battle, of course, though, was the 1934 San Francisco General Strike. And at the heart of the strike was the dreaded Shape Up. This took place at the Ferry Building. Every morning, it was a humiliating cattle call for longshore workers to come and beg for jobs. They never knew from one day to the next whether they were going to have jobs or not. In May of '34, a strike broke out, and the epicenter of that strike was the waterfront in San Francisco. This took place all up and down the Pacific coast, but San Francisco was the heart of the maritime strike. And on July 5th, Bloody Thursday, 2 workers were shot and killed at the corner of Stewart and Mission Street, right around the corner from where the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Monument is located. A massive funeral march was held for them, beginning at the Longshore Workers headquarters on Stewart Street and then up Market Street. And this funeral march galvanized the general strike, which shut the city down from the 16th to the 19th of July. This strike transformed the city. The San Francisco Labor Archives and Research Center is home to many collections that document the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. We have exciting newspapers from the time, both labor and communist newspapers that carefully documented and wrote about the war as it unfolded, as well as other social justice issues and materials documented there.
Thank you, Walter and Susan, for remembering Anne and their vision. And thank you, Catherine, for explaining some of the rich history of the Embarcadero area and its significance for the monument. The plaza next to the monument is a starting point and or an ending point for many marches and demonstrations. Every year on July 5th, the ILWU and other labor groups gather in Embarcadero Plaza to commemorate Bloody Thursday, July 5th, 1934. When the entire area was turned into a battleground and 2 workers were killed. This triggered the general strike, which you just heard about, which transformed the Longshoremen Union into one of the most progressive unions led by Harry Bridges. When the Spanish Civil War broke out 2 years later, workers saw it as a continuation of their struggle on an international level, and they joined the brigades. When they returned from Spain, the Lincolns were hounded by the FBI and blacklisted. They couldn't get jobs. The ILWU took in many of them, along with other dissidents. Our next speaker, ILWU leader Brian McWilliams, has been one of the most ardent supporters. After Brian, Rafael Jesus Gonzalez, the poet laureate of Berkeley, will read a poem to the Lincoln Brigade and the monument. Brian, tell us about the Lincoln Brigade and the ILWU.
I'm Brian McWilliams. I spent 50 years in maritime on the San Francisco West Coast waterfront fighting for workers' rights. I'm a past president of the ILWU and was a San Francisco Port Commissioner, which allowed me to help provide the space for the Lincoln Vets Monument. People today have no first-hand knowledge of the movements opposing fascism in Europe in the 1930s and 40s, nor the crippling and unthinkable toll fascism had on common people. The fighters of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade challenged those fascist powers, and they did so by placing their lives on the line. Courageous acts that our own government tried to stop, refusing them passports, and later labeling them premature anti-fascists. While the initial struggle was lost, those who returned from Spain never lost sight of the good fight and never gave up on the struggle for social justice. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union was a welcome home for many of these vets. They fit seamlessly into our progressive democratic brand of trade unionism born from workers' struggle for justice. Some have said these people couldn't get jobs anywhere else, so they had to come here. But I don't see it that way. I see they found a comfortable place where they could be who they were. And they flocked to the organization for that reason. We were part of the CIO, a wall-to-wall union movement where everybody was equal and everybody had a voice. They became a huge part of the moral compass that guided our politics and educated our young members. They were involved in every issue that came along. They never stood silent. I remember the Vietnam War protests and the School of the Americas, support for the Palestinian cause, Nicaragua, El Salvador, the refusal to unload ships from Chile after the military coup, the anti-apartheid boycott. There wasn't a single issue of political importance that they weren't vocally prominent in one way or another. Even the AIDS issue. They were born into an environment where the world was in political turmoil, from the Industrial Revolution to the great experiment of the Russian Revolution. They believed in making a better place for all the living. And that's who they were. That's what oozed out of their pores, like it was a natural thing. They fought so hard and struggled so much and sacrificed for all of us. A mindset that one could actually go out and do something to create meaningful change. We will never forget them. And now that they're gone, we've got to pass the baton along. They carried the torch that others are carrying now. Their example is extremely important, especially in our current political environment. The Lincoln Brigade Monument is a necessary reminder of the sacrifice and dedication that is required to build a better world. No pasarán.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, good day, good afternoon. Rafael Jesus Gonzalez here to commemorate, to rededicate the memorial to the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. I might say that I was born right on the US-Mexican border, so that consequently I grew up bilingually, biculturally, and all my work is written in both languages, Spanish and English. So the words that I would share with you in this occasion, the rededication of the monument, titled Monumento a la Brigada Abraham Lincoln. A orillas de la bahía de San Francisco, en la tierra de los Ramatú-Xoloni, se erige el monumento a los jovencitos, jovencitas, blancos y negros, que oyendo el grito por auxilio de la República Española, salieron a defender la democracia contra fascistas hace 83 años. Tal en breve, crudo y frío es la historia de la brigada Abraham Lincoln, que encontró en los desastres de guerra macabros caprichos. Su sangre regó la tierra de España en lugares cuyos nombres resuenan en la historia. El valle de Jarama, Brunete, Balsita, Teruel, y manchó de rojo las aguas del Ebro. Al fin perdió la democracia, ganaron los fascistas. Muchos de la brigada volvieron a luchar en otra guerra contra el fascismo o luchar por la democracia y justicia en su propia tierra, en la que encontraron sospecha, persecución, prejuicio, pero jamás perdieron la fe. Vive su memoria al honor del país. Hoy la luz sigue. La misma. El presidente grita, Hagamos América grande de nuevo. Y significa lo mismo que el viva la muerte de los fascistas españoles de aquellos tiempos. Más que este monumento a la brigada, sea nuestra lucha por el bien de la tierra, por la justicia, la paz. Tomemos a las calles y con amor feroz a la tierra y a la vida, hagamos nuestra revolución con rosas rojas en el puño. Monument to the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. On the shore of San Francisco Bay, in the land of the Ramaitu Shaloni, rises the monument to the young men, women, white and black, who, hearing the cry for help of the Spanish Republic, left to defend democracy against fascists 83 years ago. Such is the brief, raw, and cold history of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade that found in the disasters of war grim whims. Their blood watered the soil of Spain in places whose names resound in their history. The valley of Jarama, Brunete, Valchita, Teruel, and stained with red the waters of the Ebro. At the end, democracy lost. The fascists won. Many of the brigade returned to fight another war against fascism, or struggle for democracy and justice in their own land, in which they found suspicion, persecution, prejudice. But never did they lose faith. Their memory lives on to the honor of the country. Today, the struggle goes on, the same one. The president cries, "Make America great again." And it means the same as the long-lived death of the Spanish fascists of those times. More than this monument to the brigade, let our struggle for the good of the earth, for justice, for peace. Let us take to the streets and with a fierce love of the earth and of life, make our revolution with red roses in our fists.
Thank you, Brian, and the ILWU for all your support. And thank you, Raphael, for that great poem, a fitting invocation of this land, tradition, activism, the brigade, the monument, and a call out to what we must do to save our country and the earth. We were originally going to have this celebration at the monument in May, but COVID-19 nixed that. So instead, we have put together a virtual experience to give you out there a sense of the monument. The Monument Speaks, a dramatic readings of text accompanied by images from the monument. The texts are read by children and grandchildren of vets and Lincoln Brigade supporters. The video was edited by Rick Tejada Flores. Now, let's hear what the monument has to say.
Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Que nos cubrirá de glorias, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Que nos cubrirá de glorias, ay Carmela, ay Carmela.
Spain made me feel that I was a part of the world, that I could play a role no matter how small, and that it was significant. And I think that I lost a lot of my fear. What can be worse than dying? There's really very little worse. And once we didn't die, and we survived it, and we came back, other things were never that frightening again.
Spain changed my whole life. I saw a country struggling. Ordinary people, peasants, poor people. They couldn't even read or write. But when these young people came up to the front, we became an integrated army. The people struggling against the oppressing group of fascists. It left an indelible impression on my mind. So when I got back, I decided I was going to be committed to furthering the cause of the people, whatever I did.
If you look out the window and see a hungry, emaciated child, and do not feel a desire to do something to make the world a little better, then you are not a complete human being.
While the international brigades were only a small portion of the total Republican Army, they played a crucial role, especially at the beginning of the war. Our presence showed the Spanish people had supporters, even though the Western nations had refused to help the Republic. We were a small volunteer army, inspired by conviction, and became a powerful symbolic force.
From the time I arrived in Spain until the time I left, for that period of my life, I felt like a human being, like a man. People didn't look at me with hatred in their eyes because I was black.
The artist must take sides. He must elect to fight for freedom or for slavery. I've made my choice. I had no alternative.
Camaradas, entonces os he visto, y mis ojos están ahora llenos de orgullo, porque os vi a través de la mañana de niebla llegar a la frente pura de Castilla, silenciosos y firmes como campanas antes del alba, llenos de solemnidad y de ojos azules. Venir de lejos, lejos, venir de vuestros rincones, de vuestras patrias perdidas, de vuestros sueños llenos de dulzura quemada y de fusiles, a defender la ciudad española en que la libertad acorralada puede caer y morir, mordida por las bestias.
Poet, on the battlefront of the world, what does your heart hear? What poems unfurl their flags made of blood to flame in our skies? Bright banners made of words with red wings to fly over the trenches and over the frontiers and over all barriers of time through the years to sing this story of Spain. On the ramparts of the world, what does your heart hear, poet? What songs unfurl?
Never before in the history of the world had there been such a body of men, a spontaneously gathered international volunteer army, drawn from every stratum of human life and every human occupation, hand workers and professionals, intellectuals and farmers. The very existence of this army that has played so crucial a role in the Spanish Civil War was guarantee of international working class brotherhood. The final proof that those who perform the work of the world possess a common interest and an identical obligation. These men had fought and died with and for each other, their roster also the roster of mankind.
I have praised the cause of the Republic of Spain on the slightest provocation for 20 years, and I'm tired of explaining that the Spanish Republic was neither a collection of blood-slathering Reds nor a cat's paw of Russia. Long ago, I also gave up repeating that the men who fought and those who died for the Republic, whatever their nationality and whether they were communists, anarchists, socialists, poets, plumbers, middle-class professional men, or the one Abyssinian prince, were brave and disinterested, as there were no rewards in Spain. They were fighting for us all against the combined force of European fascism. They deserved our thanks and our respect and got neither.
There'll always be a place for us somewhere, somehow, as long as we see to it that the working people struggle on. Fight for everything they have. Fight for everything they hope to get. For dignity, equality, democracy, to oppose war, and to bring to the world a better life.
Spain has been etched in the hearts of our generation and carried around like a terrible wound. Spain gave us our first taste of defeat. And because of her, we discovered with an enduring shock that one can be right and still be defeated. That sheer force can trample the human spirit underfoot. And that there are times when courage goes unrewarded. Without a doubt, this explains why so many people the world over have experienced the Spanish drama as their own personal tragedy.
Spain does not end the story of the Lincoln Brigade. Just as most volunteers of the 1930s had participated in other movements for social justice, so the veterans continued to seek causes that reaffirmed their anti-fascist principles. Spain in this way became a prototype and a precedent for involvement in El Salvador, Nicaragua, South Africa, the Persian Gulf, and Iraq. After 50, 60, even 70 years of commitment to radical dissent, the Lincoln veterans had come to view political agitation as the surest measure of personal fulfillment and the value of a life's work.
You are history. You are legend. You are the heroic example of democracy, solidarity, and universality. We shall not forget you. And when the olive tree of peace puts forth its leaves again, entwined with the laurels of the Spanish Republic's victory, come back. Come back to us. With us, those of you who have no country will find one. Those of you who have to live deprived of friendship will find friends. And all of you will find the love and gratitude of the whole Spanish people who now and in the future will cry out with all their hearts, "Long live the heroes of the international brigades."
Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Que nos cubrirá de glorias, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Que nos cubrirá de glorias, ay Carmela, ay Carmela.
That was great. I want to thank Rick for editing this piece, and thank you, Peter Glazer, for all your help with the readings, and the veterans and families for their readings. We are about to move to the second part of our show. The vets felt that the best way to honor them was to support other activist causes and groups. Shortly, you will hear from Kate Doyle about No More Deaths, No Más Muertes. But before that, we know that many of you are here to remember and honor the volunteers who were your relatives. You'll have a chance to mention the vets' names and comments. And while you are doing that, we'll hear Velina Brown, who has performed at many Lincoln Brigade events, performing a stirring rendition of Viva la Quince Brigada. Let's hear it, Velina.
Hello, my name is Kate Doyle, and I'm a member of ALBA's Board of Governors and chair of our Human Rights Committee. I'm also a co-recipient of the 2012 ALBA Puffin Award for Human Rights Activism, along with my colleague, Freddie Petrarelli of Guatemala. The Human Rights Activism Award is an annual prize of $100,000 presented to an individual or an organization by the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives and the Puffin Foundation. It's dedicated to the activist tradition of the U.S. volunteers who joined the international brigades to fight in the Spanish Civil War and to stem the rise of fascism. This past May 2020, we were thrilled to give the award to No More Deaths and are so pleased today to be working in collaboration with them. In their mission and their courageous work, No More Deaths represent a tribute to the legacy of the Lincolns, and they are the perfect partners to celebrate our beautiful monument. We also want to voice our solidarity with No More Deaths in light of the cruel and inhumane attack carried out over the summer by U.S. border personnel on their humanitarian campsite for migrants in the Sonoran Desert. As a result of that warrantless raid, dozens of migrants were arrested, the camp was ransacked, and documents, cameras and cell phones belonging to No More Deaths volunteers and the migrants they were serving were seized. It was the second attack on a No More Deaths campsite by border personnel since Trump took office in 2017, and ALBA condemns those actions. Today, No More Deaths is represented by Luis Osuna, a volunteer based in San Diego, who also works with his local organizations to search for and recover the remains of disappeared migrants lost during their journey into the United States. Luis was present at the campsite when the raid took place on July 31st. Luis is currently studying documentary filmmaking in Los Angeles, the goal of producing films that tell stories to promote justice and social change. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone at ALBA. My name is Luis Osuna. I'm a volunteer with the organization No Más Muertes, No More Deaths. We were the 2020 recipients of the ALBA Puffin Human Rights Award. And first and foremost, I would like to congratulate everyone over at ALBA for your monument celebration in San Francisco. I would also like to thank everyone for the decades of work and dedication. And I would like to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak. Our work at No More Deaths stretches all throughout the borderlands and the deserts of the Southwest. We stand for human rights, and we stand against the militarization of the borders and the criminalization of migration. Personally, my work in the desert began carrying out search and rescue operations in the deserts of Arizona, where we would get reports from family members and go and try and search for and rescue their loved ones. But more times than not, we would end up having to recover their remains in remote, dangerous locations in the desert. This is all a result of a Border Patrol strategic plan released in 1994 called Prevention Through Deterrence, in which Border Patrol planned to militarize borders in order to make it so that folks had to cross through the most dangerous of terrains if they wanted to make it into the United States. Border Patrol knew that this would make it dangerous. They also understood that it would cause more deaths. And here we are now, with thousands and thousands of deaths in the deserts. Our goal at No More Deaths is to continue to work and try and prevent as many of these deaths as possible. However, as militarization increases, and as we see more militarized encounters between the police state and civilians, the same is happening in the desert. On July 31st, 2020, Border Patrol carried out a raid on our humanitarian aid camp in Arivaca, Arizona. This was a tactical operation using very violent and highly trained Border Patrol agents. There were 2 helicopters, there was an armored vehicle, and there was the special operations agents from BORTAC. These are the same agents that we all saw in the protests of Portland, Oregon. As the sun set that day, we were there at camp, providing aid as we always do, and as Border Patrol knows that we always do, is provide humanitarian aid for those that need it most. And as the sun set, they entered our camp and detained folks that were recovering and receiving care. This raid from Border Patrol isn't the first one, but it is the most violent one. This escalation of violence is nothing unexpected. And unfortunately, these acts of suppression, these acts of violence, are all too common, and we've seen them throughout history from fascist governments. We understand that the situation in the deserts may continue to become more violent. However, we understand that those that suffer the most violent of situations are the migrants that are crossing the deserts. They see this violence every single day. They have to live with this violence in their home countries, and as they try and reach a better life, they have to deal with even more violence from our government. For this reason, we will continue to provide the humanitarian aid that we've been giving for over 16 years. We appreciate all the help and all of the attention that ALBA has given the organization. We're very grateful for it. And we know that being united as organizations, we'll be able to accomplish so much more and be a lot more efficient in our work. I believe that although things are becoming more violent, and although our cities and our homes and our deserts are becoming more and more militarized, by working together, by continuing to express anti-fascist ideals and practice them, we can stop the fascism that we all see spreading throughout the country. So thank you, ALBA. Again, congratulations on your monument celebration in San Francisco. Again, thank you for all the work that you've been doing. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Luis, and no Más Muertes. You are certainly carrying on the legacy of the Lincoln Brigade and would make the veterans proud of what you are doing, and we are honored to do whatever we can to help you. Well, that's just about it for today, but don't go away yet. I would like to thank ALBA for putting on this event and thank Amy Linton for editing the videos and the presenters and putting on the show together. You can find out more about ALBA's events at this ALBA Facebook page and the ALBA website. After the credits, there will be a slideshow of all the portraits of the vets. Everyone, please work on the upcoming election. It's extremely important to protect the values the Abraham Lincoln fought for. It's our chance to stop an American Francisco Franco wannabe. Remember the lessons of Spain. After Franco won, it took 40 brutal years to restore democracy and the death of thousands and thousands of people. Support organizations like Indivisible, Move On, Sunrise, Swing Left, Black Voters Matter, and others. Thanks everyone for attending. And remember to stick around for the slideshow after the credits. Please vote. Stay safe. No pasaran.
houses. They pulled out the men and they killed them with knives. And then a fine Spanish captain, he gave them permission to loot the men's houses and to use the men's wives. And they searched through the city for young ones and workers, searched us for weapons and trade union cards, and they'd rip off our blouses to look at the shoulder for the bruise that is made when a rifle kicks hard. And they herded us down to the Plaza de Toros, mounted machine guns high up in the stands. And the Moors and the Legion shot hundreds and hundreds till the blood could no longer soak into the sand. And the blood from the bodies of more than 2,000 made large crimson puddles in the blood-soaked red sand. We saw the dust clouds grow large in the distance. We shut the strong gates and we took to the
There's a valley in Spain called Jarama. It's a place that we all know so well. It was there that we fought against the fascists. We saw a peaceful valley turn to hell. From this valley they say we are going, but don't hasten to bid us adieu. Even though we lost the battle at Jarama, we'll set this valley free for we're through. We were men of the Lincoln Battalion. We're proud of the fight that we made. We know that you people of the valley will remember our Lincoln Brigade. From this valley they say we are going, but don't hasten to bid us adieu. Even though we lost that battle at Jarama, we will set this valley free for we're through. You will never find peace with these fascists. You will never find friends such as we. So remember that valley of Jarama and the people that'll set that valley free. From this valley they say that we're going, don't hasten to bid us adieu. Even though we lost the battle at Jarama, we'll set this valley free for we're through. All this world is like this valley called Jarama, so green and so bright and so fair. No fascist can dwell in our valley, nor breathe in our new freedom's air. From this valley they say that we're going, do not hasten to bid us adieu. Even though we lost the battle at Jarama, we'll set this valley free for we're through.
Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Que sea cubierta de gloria, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Que sea cubierta de gloria, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Luchamos contra los moros, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Luchamos contra los moros, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Mercenarios y fascistas, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Mercenarios y fascistas, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Solo es nuestro deseo, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Solo es nuestro deseo, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Acaba con el fascismo, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Acaba con el fascismo, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. En los frentes de Jarama, rumba la rumba la rumba la. En los frentes de Jarama, rumba la rumba la rumba la. No tenemos ni aviones, ni tanques, ni cañones, ay Manuela. No tenemos ni aviones, ni tanques, ni cañones, ay Manuela. Ya salimos de España, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Ya salimos de España, rumba la rumba la rumba la. No luchar en otros frentes, ay Manuela, ay Manuela.